Hi bakers and welcome back to the Kenwood Kids Club. This week I've got a really delicious recipe for you because I'm going to be showing you how to make my chocolate caramel cupcakes. They are the perfect combination of chocolate, caramel, all contained into one easy bite-size form. Well, bite-size if you make a really big bite. It's a chocolate cupcake, it's got a hidden caramel filling, a caramel buttercream, and then we're just going to finish it off with some sprinkles. I think you're going to love them, so I really hope that you do. But as always, if you'd like to bake along with me today, don't forget you can head down to the video description where you'll find the full list of ingredients that you will need. In fact, why not pause the video right now, go and get them all assembled, and then you'll be ready to bake along. Have you done it? Also in the video description, you'll find a link to the Kenwood Kids Club website where not only will you find the list of ingredients again, but you'll also find the full written out recipe as well. So if you're somebody who prefers to have it in front of you rather than watching a video, feel free to do that instead. While you're there, if you're not already a member of the Kenwood Kids Club, don't forget to get signed up because you'll get your own membership card, which is also a fridge magnet, and it has my face on it. And you'll be eligible to enter our Star Baker of the Month competition, but more on that later on. If it's your first time watching one of our videos, don't forget to give this one a thumbs up so I know you're here, and of course give our channel a subscribe as well by hitting that big red button down there on the right. But if you've got all of your ingredients ready, I guess we can get cracking. Now we've got a lot to do today because we need to make our sponges, we need to do our caramel filling, and we need to make our caramel buttercream as well, so we really haven't got any time to waste. To speed things up, I'm going to be using my K-Mix stand mixer, but of course if you don't have one of these at home, do feel free to just do this in a bowl with a wooden spoon. It will work just as well. This just means I don't have to do all the hard work. Now if you are ready to begin, the first thing we're going to do is cream together our butter and our sugar. Now I'm actually using baking spread today, which is an alternative to butter that is quite easy to work with. It's actually made from vegetable fats, but it gives you a really, really light sponge, and it doesn't take as long to come to room temperature as well, which when the weather's still quite cold and miserable like it is at the moment, this can make your life a lot easier. You can also do it with butter as well, so it's really up to you. Personally, I find I don't miss the butter taste in a chocolate sponge. Now I'm going to put the butter or the baking spread into the bowl of the mixer. I'm going to make sure I get all of it because I've carefully weighed out all of these ingredients, so I don't want to waste any. And in with that, I'm going to add some golden caster sugar. Again, don't forget all of the quantities that you will need are down in the list of ingredients in the video description. But once those are both in there, I'm going to grab my trusty creaming beater. You can also use a K-beater as well. I'm going to pop this on, put the top down, and then I'm just going to turn this on a kind of a low to medium speed, so about a number 3, until it comes together and is nice and smooth and creamy. Now do excuse my squeaky bowl, that's just the rubber bits on the creaming beater rubbing against the glass, but as the mixture starts coming together, it will stop. Now this step takes about a minute or 2, so I'm not going to make you watch the whole thing. What we'll do is we'll jump ahead until mine's ready and I'll show you what it looks like. When your mixture has come together, if I pop this bowl off, hopefully you can see that this mixture is lovely and smooth and creamy, and it's got a little bit paler as well. Now we're ready to go in with our next ingredients, which are our wet ingredients. Now if you've watched a few of our videos before, you'll know that I'm a bit of a fan of what I call a hybrid method of cake mix making. So the two most common types of ways of making cakes are the creaming method, which you'll find explained fully in the recipe over at the Kenwood Kids Club website, which is where you add in the eggs and then you add in your flour and so on. There's also something called the all-in-one method, which is where you just put everything into the bowl in one go and mix it together. Mary Berry's a big fan of that one. Personally, I like to combine the two because when we're creaming together our butter and our sugar, like I've done here, we're trapping in loads of air, and that's going to help give us a really light sponge. However, at this stage, to make your life a bit easier, you can switch from the creaming method to the all-in-one method and thereby add everything else in at the same time, because that air is already trapped and actually it's really easy to knock some of it back out when you start adding your liquid. So that's what I'm going to do today, but if you'd prefer to do the traditional creaming method, again, you'll find that fully explained in the written recipe over on the Kenwood Kids Club website. I've got 4 medium eggs here, and I'm just going to crack those straight into the bowl. And my top tip for cracking eggs without getting shell in there is to tap them on the table, not on the bowl. If you tap them on the bowl, the rim actually pushes some of the shell inside, and so it's more likely for some of it to come off and end up in your mix. Sometimes I explain this in a video and then I drop some shell in anyway, so it's not perfect, but it's going pretty well today. No shell. As I say, I'm going to put everything in at the same time. So now on top of the eggs, I'm going to add my vanilla extract, and I'm doing 1 teaspoon of that today. Do try and use actual extract if you can, rather than an essence, because an essence is a chemical flavour rather than real vanilla. We like to use real vanilla. So we've got eggs, we've got vanilla. I'm also going to add in some self-raising flour. Now, with a chocolate sponge, we replace some of the flour with cocoa powder, and that's what's going to give us that lovely chocolatey flavour. But of course, self-raising flour has a raising agent in it, and by taking some of that out, we're losing that raising agent. So the last ingredient I'm going to add right now is some baking powder, and I'm going to put in 1 teaspoon. Now you'll notice I haven't sieved any of my ingredients into this bowl, and that's simply because I'd already sieved them into the little bowls you've seen me using. So if you haven't done that step, you'll need to make sure you're sieving them in at this step. But when you've done that, pop it back on the stand mixer, put the top down, and we're just going to mix this until it's fully combined. It doesn't take very long at all. I always start on a really low speed, just so that my flour doesn't go whoosh out of the bowl. And then as it starts to come together, we'll turn up to about a number 3 again, and it only needs to mix for about 30 to 40 seconds. Hopefully you can see that cocoa powder has made this mixture go a lovely chocolatey brown colour, and the smell that I'm getting from it is absolutely wonderful already. And that is already looking beautifully smooth. So again, if I pop the bowl off, you can see that's what it's looking like now. But before we carry on, I'm just going to grab my trusty spatula and just scrape around the sides, because there's always a little bit that just doesn't get caught up in the mixture. And with a chocolate sponge, I need to make sure everything is fully combined. Otherwise we'll end up with a marble cake. Ooh, that's an idea. Perhaps we should do a marble cake in a future video. Okay, so that's looking great, but I'm also just going to grab this beater and give that a scrape too, because I can see that some of my dry ingredients have got caught on there, and I want those mixed in as well. So just a really quick scrape, and then this can go in the sink because we're going to need it again in a minute. Now while I was popping that in the sink, I've also put my oven on to preheat as well, because these are almost ready to go into the oven. You want your oven to be set to 180 degrees or 160 degrees fan, which is gas mark 4. The other thing that I'd like you to do now is to grab a muffin tin. Now a muffin tin like this one here has slightly deeper holes than some cupcake tins, so you do need to make sure that you're using one of these, and you also need to make sure that you've bought muffin cases, or at least deeper cupcake cases. These ones are just from the supermarket, they're nothing special at all, but I find they always give me absolutely great results. I've gone for white ones today, but if you prefer to use colourful ones, that's fine too. Something like a brown or a gold would look absolutely brilliant with these cupcakes. So I'm just putting 1 case in each section, 12 altogether, and then regular viewers will know what's coming next. I'm going to use my ice cream scoop to portion out my cupcake mixture into these cases. Now the reason why I like using an ice cream scoop is it makes sure that I always have the same amount of mixture in each case. And I sometimes say it also helps keep me neat and tidy, but whenever I say that I end up making a mess. So we'll see what happens today. So I want 1 full scoop, and this is a large cupcake scoop, so it's about 3 tablespoons-ish of mixture per case. And I'm just going to scoop it up, make sure it's nice and level, and then pop it straight in. If you don't have an ice cream scoop like this one here, you can just use a couple of dessert spoons, but you want to make sure that you don't overfill your case. Try and leave about 1 centimetre or so around the top edge. A general rule to follow is you want your case to be somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 full, because of course our cakes are going to rise in the oven, and so if we put too much mixture in, they'll overflow out of the cases. And 12. Now I've got a little bit of mixture left in my bowl, so what I could do is grab another muffin tin, put a couple of extra cases in and make those up into cupcakes as well. What I'm not going to do is spread that out amongst these, because then they'll end up being too full. It's just one of those very strange things. Sometimes that recipe will give you exactly the right amount, sometimes it will give you a bit too much. Don't know why. These can now go into that preheated oven for somewhere between 22 and 25 minutes. And what we're looking for them to have done is risen really, really well. They should be soft and spongy to the touch if you get your adult to touch the top of them for you. And if you poke a cocktail stick or a skewer inside the middle, when it comes out, it should be clean. It shouldn't have any wet cake mix on it. If it's a bit greasy, that's fine. It's that wet cake mix you're looking for. So I'm going to pop my cupcakes into that preheated oven. I'm going to have a bit of a tidy up, and then we're going to carry on, because of course we still need to make our caramel filling and our caramel buttercream. So don't go anywhere, give me a second, and then we'll carry on. So my cupcakes are in the oven, and now what I'm going to do is make my caramel filling. And I say make my caramel filling, but between you and I've actually got some tinned caramel. Now this one is available in most supermarkets and it's really user friendly, so don't worry about making your own caramel. Buy some of this, it will be perfect. Now for the filling, all we're going to do is put some of this in a bowl and add a little pinch of salt. Now I don't want to make it salty like a salted caramel, because we're not making salted caramel cupcakes, but this stuff is really, really sweet. So what we're going to do is just take some of the edge off that sweetness by adding a tiny little bit of salt. Now I disappeared off camera to do that bit simply because I wanted to weigh this. I only need around about 90 grams of caramel for all of my cupcakes. So I've just done that over on the scales over there, and I've actually got about 100 grams here. Into that, I'm going to add a small pinch of salt, not too much at all. As I say, we're not making salted caramel, we are just taking some of the edge off that sweetness. And then I'm going to mix this together. Now you'll see it's nice and thick, not so thick that you wouldn't be able to put it in a cake. You can get other caramels that are thicker for things like Millionaire shortbread, but this one is good for cakes because you can see it's a little bit runny, but not too runny. So that is essentially ready to use now, so I'm going to pop that to one side, but we're going to keep the tin here because we're also going to add some of this to our buttercream, which we're going to make next. So I've got my bowl for my mixer again, which I've given a clean, and into that I'm going to add some butter. Now again, I like to use salted or slightly salted butter for my buttercream, just because I find that using unsalted butter and all that sugar makes it really, really sweet. Now if you've got a massive sweet tooth, that's absolutely fine, but I prefer to kind of make things slightly less sweet if I can by, again, using a little bit of salt. Now it's quite cold at the moment, which means that your room temperature ingredients might still be quite hard. If you find that your butter is still too hard when you get it ready to make your buttercream, you can pop it in the microwave on full power for about 15 to 20 seconds, and that will just soften things up slightly. Now, don't panic if it melts it a little bit and you have a little bit of liquid at the bottom, it will still be fine. So I've got my trusty spatula again, and I'm just going to use that to help me transfer that butter into the bowl. This again goes onto the mixer, and there's my creaming beater again, which I'm going to use just to cream everything together. Now with butter, what we want is for it to get really, really pale and really, really smooth. And that will mean that, again, we've managed to trap some air in it. The longer you leave this running, the whiter your buttercream will be. So I'm going to start this off, squeaky bowl again. And this time, instead of a low to medium speed, I'm actually going to go for more of a medium to high speed. So around about a number 5 on my K-mix. Now this, I will leave running for about 5 minutes. Again, I'm not going to make you watch that. Instead, what we'll do is we'll jump ahead till my butter is nice and smooth and pale, and I'll show you what to do next. So it's been about 5 minutes, and again, if I take this bowl off and show you what it looks like, can you see how pale that butter has gone? Now, into this, we're going to add our icing sugar. And so with 150 grams of butter, we need to double that figure for our icing sugar. So it's 300 grams. Now that's true regardless of how much buttercream you were making. So if you wanted to double this batch, you would do 300 grams of butter, 600 grams of icing sugar. Now, unfortunately, lots of icing sugars recently have become very clumpy because some of the companies that make them have changed what they call the anti-caking agent. So we do need to make sure that we sieve our icing sugar. Now, the one I've got is just from the supermarket and it's really clumpy this time. So I'm actually going to use a spoon to help me push this through the sieve. There are brands that are better, but just check the one you've got, and if it is a bit clumpy, do make sure you pop it through a sieve first, just otherwise you'll end up with quite gritty buttercream, and nobody likes gritty buttercream. Now to flavour our buttercream, we're going to go back to that caramel again. We're going to use 2 tablespoons of it to give us that lovely caramel flavour. So if you use a tablespoon measure, you can then scrape across the top with your spatula to make sure you're being nice and accurate. It can be quite tricky to get it back out again with your spatula, mind, so you might need to dive in there with your finger. That's why it's so important to make sure that we wash our hands when we're working with food. I forgot to mention that this week. And then this goes back on the mixer again, and make sure you start on a really low speed. So when your K-mix, that would be the red circle, because what that's going to do is mix slow enough that your icing sugar isn't going to explode everywhere. As it starts to come together, you can then increase that speed slightly and mix it until it's nice and smooth. Now, before I let this mix completely, because that caramel is quite thick, it's not going to thin down our buttercream mixture as much as adding a liquid extract would. So what I'm going to do is grab some water, and I'm just going to pop in about a tablespoon, although if you need a little bit more, you can always add some more. And just now allow that to mix completely until again it's really, really smooth. Now I'm not going to leave this mixing for ages because what I'm going to do now is just give it a final mix by hand with my spatula, and then we can pop some cling film over the bowl, and we're going to wait until our cupcakes are finished baking, which mine have got about 5 minutes to go, and then they need to cool down, of course, which will take a good couple of hours. So if we, as I say, give this a quick scrape around with our spatula, we can check everything is fully incorporated, and then we can just leave it to one side until we're ready to assemble our cupcakes together. So this is looking great. I'm going to cling film these, and then again we'll jump ahead until my cakes are fully cooled down, and I'll show you how to assemble your cakes, your filling, your topping, and of course some decoration as well. So I'll see you in a second. Okay, so it's been a couple of hours and my cupcakes are feeling like they're nice and cool, so I'm ready to assemble my cupcakes. First thing I'm going to do is I've uncovered the bowl of the stand mixer. I'm going to put the creaming beater back on. And I'm just going to give this buttercream one final mix. Only needs to be mixed for about a minute or so, just to make sure it's all nice and loose and smooth again. And what this also does is any air bubbles that had kind of formed when we first made it, it will help smooth those out again, so we end up with a smoother buttercream. While that's mixing, I'm just going to show you that I have taken a large piping bag and I've put my favourite piping tip, which is an open star, in there. Hopefully you can see it on one of the cameras. I've also transferred my caramel sauce into a piping bag as well. Now, if you don't have piping bags at home, you can do this using a sandwich bag. Just pop it in, squeeze it all down to one corner, and you can cut a tip off there. Or if you have something like one of these squeezy bottles, that's great for putting sauce in your cupcakes as well. So that is now nice and smooth and mixed. So all that we need to do now is transfer this into the other piping bag, the one with the piping tip. My favourite way to do that is I fold over the top so that I can hold it in my hand, but that top folded over bit is going to stop me hopefully getting buttercream all over me, and I can use my thumb to scrape across to make sure that I get all the buttercream off. Now, you might want to get someone to help you with this because 2 hands are definitely easier than 1. Or you can do what I did with the caramel, which is just pop your piping bag in a container that's big enough that you can then put your buttercream into it. I'm going to try and get all of this out so I don't waste any. And then I can just shake it down so it goes right down to the end. I'm just going to squeeze down that last little bit as well. Now, the last thing we need to do before we start piping our cupcakes, which again, some of you have seen me do before, some of you might be seeing this for the first time, we need to put our filling in our cupcakes. Now, obviously, there's currently nowhere for our filling to go in our cupcakes, so I have a snazzy little tool that looks like this, which is called a cupcake corer. And what this does is it lets you just pop it on the top, twist it backwards and forwards, and then it will pull out part of the cupcake. Now, if you don't have a cupcake corer, which let's be honest, I'm sure most of you don't, you can do this with an apple corer, or just get an adult to help you cut out some small holes with a sharp knife. Now, we're going to pop those back on top of our caramel, so don't throw them away and don't eat them, however you might be tempted. And we're just going to whiz through and core these as quickly as we can. Then, when you've done that, grab your caramel sauce, cut a little hole in the end of the piping bag. You don't need a tip for this one. And then just add some caramel to the middle of each of those holes. Now again, if you don't have a piping bag, or if you don't have a squeezy bottle, you can just spoon your caramel into the cakes. It's just a little bit more fiddly. So, whichever is easiest for you to do at home. Now, try not to overfill those centres because, as I say, we are going to pop the top bit of the cake back on. So we do need a little bit of room left over. But I think I've been a little bit mean. I think we can have a bit more in those. Grab those tops, just gently place them back on. They don't need to be perfectly level. And you also don't need to worry about matching the correct top with the cake you took it from. And that's how it becomes a surprise centre, you see, because when you first look at the cake, you won't know that there's a little pool of caramel inside. Okay, and then the last bit, we're going to grab our buttercream and we're going to pipe a rosette on the top of each one of these cakes. Now again, you've seen me do this before if you've watched our videos, but for those of you that haven't, the way we do that is we start in the middle and then we draw a circle around the outside like that, and that is a rosette. Now this can be quite tricky the first few times you do it, but I always say to people, if you have any leftover buttercream after you've done some cupcakes, grab a chopping board or a plate and just practice piping your rosettes, and then you can scrape it off the chopping board back into the bag and do it over and over again. I wouldn't feed that buttercream to anyone afterwards though, because it wouldn't be very nice. But it's just a really good way to keep practicing. But again, start in the middle and then around the outside, and you will find the more you do it, the quicker and the more confident you will get. And there we go, those are our chocolate caramel cupcakes. We've got our chocolate sponge, our caramel filling, and our caramel buttercream topping. Now, of course, we could just leave them like this. If you've got any of your caramel sauce left, you could drizzle some of that across the top. I'm going to do that on a couple of mine. Or, of course, you can top them with sprinkles. And let's be honest, sprinkles make everything better. Now, I've actually got two different types of topping to use on my cupcakes today. I've got these mini fudge pieces that I found in the shop, and also this really cool chocolate caramel sprinkle mix. So I've done 4 with my sauce. I'm going to do 4 with these cool little fudge pieces, because I think they'll go really well with chocolate and caramel. And you'll notice I'm not being particularly fussy about how I put them on. I'm just dropping them on top. And then finally I'm going to do 4 with this sprinkle mix, and I will warn you, it will go everywhere. But if you want to try and keep things a bit more under control, you can pop your cooling rack over a baking tray, and then anything that falls through will land in that tray. But there we go, there are my chocolate caramel cupcakes. So again, chocolate sponge, caramel filling, caramel buttercream, and then we've just topped them in a few different ways. I really do hope that you like the sound of this recipe and that you're going to give it a try. And remember, if you do fancy baking along with me today, head down to the video description where you'll find the full list of ingredients that you will need. You can also head to the Kenwood Kids Club website where you'll find the full written out recipe as well. And don't forget, while you're there, make sure you are signed up to be a member of the Kenwood Kids Club, because not only will you get your own membership card, but you'll also be able to enter our Star Baker of the Month competition. Now, at the start of the video, I said I would tell you more about that later. So basically what that means is every single month we choose one person amongst all our members that have baked along with one of our bake-alongs to be our Star Baker of the Month. And that person will win their very own Kenwood Kids Club goodie bag and a Kenwood hand mixer too. Now, the hand mixer alone is an absolutely fantastic prize if you're really into your baking, but the goodie bag is also stuffed full of all the sorts of things that will help you along the way with your baking journey. So if you fancy the sound of that, head to the Kenwood Kids Club website, make sure you're signed up, and then of course have a go at my chocolate caramel cupcakes, take a picture, upload it to the site, and who knows, I could be announcing you as our Star Baker of the Month for January this time next month. Now, I'm going to dig in to one of these delicious looking cupcakes right now so I can tell you how good they are. But don't forget, we'll be back at the same time next week with another bake along video. So make sure you've hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss it. Give this video a thumbs up so I know you've been watching, and of course, yum. They are so yummy. And of course, have a go at my chocolate caramel cupcakes. That's all from me. I do hope you enjoyed this week's video. And until next time, as always, take care and happy baking. Bye everyone.